On today's episode of the Cryptoverse. Now I've finished my two-part series on why I voted for the 30 block producers that I did. It's time for me to deliver on a promise. Back when I did my step-by-step guide to how exactly to vote for block producers, I received a whole bunch of comments and questions, and I said I would make a video answering those questions. This is that video. Alrighty then, so I've got 9 points to address here. There was tons of comments, but I picked out the ones that I think cover most bases. So the first thing is, people say when it comes to entering a key pair in Scatter, many people have noticed that there is a button where you can generate a brand new key pair right from within Scatter. So some people have actually done this when following the instructions, which isn't what I said to do. Right, if you generate the key pair from within Scatter, well then you'll be generating a brand new private key, which has a 0 balance and therefore has no voting power. So that's why I didn't tell you to do that. You have to use the private key that was generated during the EOS token distribution using the official token distribution app, right? This is why it was so important to register your tokens before the end of the ICO, because the registration tool is now no longer available, right? The EOS token on the Ethereum network is now frozen permanently and is now redundant, because had you registered them, they would now be replaced with the live network tokens. So in my tutorial, when I pasted my EOS private key into Scatter, Scatter was able to take control of my EOS tokens and then vote with the full weight of all of my tokens, right? So that's why I put my private key into Scatter rather than generating a new key pair. So that's point one. Point two, someone said when they imported their keys into Scatter and set up an identity, they accidentally selected the owner account instead of the active account, because I recommended that you selected the active account and someone went and selected the owner account, and they said, is that bad? Well, the answer is no, that's okay, it'll still work. The only reason I say use the active account rather than the owner account is that the owner account has full permissions over your EOS account. So just for the sake of security really, it's always best to avoid using your owner account unless absolutely necessary. Unless there's something that needs full access to your account, which is very rare, don't use the owner key, right? It's fine if you do, it's just better security if you use a strong, a weaker key, if you like, with less permissions. So this is one of the new unique features of EOS. If you think about Bitcoin and Ethereum, in those networks, simply by having the private key allows you to do anything with that account, right? There's one key and it does everything. So there is only, in Ethereum and Bitcoin, there is only an owner key, if that makes sense. They don't call it that because it's the only thing. So in EOS we have several different keys. Each key allows more or less actions to be taken with your account, right? And this is great for when you say, I don't know, you want an app to act on your behalf, but you don't want it to do certain things like be able to transfer tokens out of your wallet, right? If it's a social network based on EOS, for example, then you can give it a key that allows it to, send messages from your account or vote or whatever, but there is absolutely no need for that social media app to ever access your EOS tokens or transfer them, right? Which is why we would use a lower level permission key. So that's why I say this thing about the active and the owner key, right? So in a situation where you want to use a lower permission key, it's always best to do that, because then an app that you use can't even steal your tokens even if it wanted to, right? So that's point number two. Point number three, people say, why didn't I just tell people to use the Greymass voting app? Because it's much simpler. So Greymass is a block producer candidate. They produced this desktop software application. It's called EOS Voter. You download it, you give it your key. So you install it on your computer, give it your key, and then in a couple of clicks, you can vote. So yes, arguably it is simpler to vote with the EOS Voter tool than with Scatter in the way I described. So while that's true, it does make it easier to vote. If you've never taken any of my online courses before, then you won't appreciate the quality of my teaching style. And what I mean by that is, when I explain something, I don't want to just you to be able to fish for a day, right? I want to empower you to fish for life. So that's sort of the overarching philosophy that I use. So yes, I could have told you to use the GreyMass app, and by all means go ahead and do that if that's what you want. However, for the people that put in the work to get Scatter working and get it set up in the way that I described, they are now all set up to immediately start using EOS-based apps as soon as they launch, right? So the people who used GreyMass to vote, fine, they may have found it easier in the short term. However, they'll still have to go through the process of setting up Scatter, but they won't realize that until they find an app they want to use but can't. So, you know, there is method in my madness. When I'm teaching you something, you probably don't appreciate all the thought that I've put into it, right? It's not always just about doing it the quickest and easiest way. Sometimes the shortcut actually costs you further down the line. Those are the things I think about, and as a responsible teacher, I'm laying out a path which is, in the long run, better for you. So, point number 4. Someone said, quote, "Nah, private key is a no-no. You whales can vote and fight amongst yourselves. The result affects you guys more than those little fishes. Not worth the risk on my part." Close quote. I would say that's a fair comment. However, if you have your EOS in a private wallet, well, you're going to have to input your private key into a wallet at some point. Even if all you plan to do is transfer those EOS tokens to an exchange and then sell them, you're still going to need a wallet to build that transaction and broadcast it to the network. And it needs the private key to do that, right? So you're not going to be able to initiate any transactions without some kind of wallet software and without allowing it to use your private key to sign that transaction, right? The general advice is not to import a private key into a random website. So the difference is with Scatter is a software app that's installed on your local computer, and it makes a point of storing your private key on your local computer, right? Even though it's in your web browser, it's not on the web as such. It all happens on your computer. So unless your computer is already infected with like a virus that's monitoring your screen and recording the keys you press on the keyboard, unless that is the case, then your private key remains private. So point number 5, someone said, quote, "Thanks for the info. I'm no way game enough to trust anyone, repeat anyone, with my private key. Am I missing the point, Chris? Why on earth would you take such a risk?" Close quote. Well, that person obviously doesn't have any money on an exchange, has never used an exchange, or has never used a third-party wallet, a software wallet anyway. They must be entirely using hardware wallets, and even then, you're somewhat trusting the manufacturing process. So, you know, this is an illusion of complete trustlessness. Trust comes into the process at some point. We just want to minimize it, right? So my actual answer to that at the time was pretty much what I said a minute ago. If you never plan to input your private key into a wallet ever, well, how are you ever going to do anything with your EOS tokens? You're only just going to be able to stare at them on the public blockchain. You're never going to be able to move them because you're never going to be able to sign a transaction with the key using a wallet software. So, don't know what to tell you. So number 6, someone said, quote, "It looks like you did all these inputs with an unsecured web page," close quote. So they were talking about the fact that there was no, SSL certificate on the web address that I was visiting on the EOS voter portal. So here's a little bit of a misunderstanding about how all this works technically. So those SSL pages, that's for securing web pages on the internet. In the blockchain space, it's very different. So the reason it didn't matter that I was communicating with an unsecured web page was because the information that I was exchanging between my computer and the server was already encrypted, right? So Scatter is installed on my computer, it has the private key on my computer as well, and then Scatter takes all the parameters of the transaction, such as like who I'm voting for, what my account name is, who I'm sending it to, all that sort of stuff. It then takes my private key and signs the transaction with it, and then it broadcasts the parameters and the signature to the portal. It does not broadcast my private key. It only broadcasts a single-use signature that was created with my private key in conjunction with all of the transaction parameters, right? So that's key. Excuse the pun. So that means if anyone intercepted the data in between me and the website and say they modified the transaction in some way, well then the transaction signature would no longer be valid and the transaction would fail, right? When you take all of the parameters of a transaction and then you include your private key and hash it, right, sign it, it produces a unique DNA for that transaction, and you change anything about the inputs to that transaction, you change one letter in my account name, you change one of the block producers that I'm voting for, you put a dot anywhere in that transaction and the signature is invalid. You have to then re-sign the transaction with the private key in order for that transaction to be valid again. So if a attacker got hold of that piece of data in between me and the portal and modified it, worst case, the transaction would have failed. But in no way could they figure out what my private key was, because all they would have is a one-use signature that's only valid if the transaction goes ahead in the way that I built it with scatter. So it's not a problem. So this is actually why I put together my online courses. It's so you have a deeper understanding of these concepts, which I can't really explain in detail in a YouTube video, right? It needs a step-by-step structured course like that, so it helps you understand what you're doing in this space. So the encryption concept in particular is covered in the Digital Money Revolution course. So if you want a deeper understanding of how all this stuff works technically, go and take that course. Point 7. Someone said, quote, "Wow, this is risky beyond belief. I wouldn't send my private PIN to anyone. You can't complain when your crypto disappears, lol. You just gave your private PIN away and it's being sold on the dark web. Laughed my ass off." Close quote. Well, that comment actually has more than meets the eye. This person obviously wants to sabotage EOS and is going around YouTube attempting to do so by scaring people who are uninformed. So the other thing that makes me think this person is uninformed is they call it a private PIN. So PIN is like the thing you use with your credit or debit card. So I really don't give any credence to that person whatsoever. And oddly enough, if my private PIN is being sold on the dark web right now, it's kind of odd that all my EOS tokens are still in my account. What gives? So let me know when you've got it off the dark web, will you, and transferred all my tokens out. Point 8. Many people ask, quote, "Why would anyone bother to vote?" Close quote. Simple answer to that is this. If we don't reach that 15% threshold, the network won't activate and all your EOS tokens will be worthless because there will be no network to use. Now, I'm going to address this later in the video. The EOS network has activated just prior to starting recording this, but I'll address that in a mo. So if your EOS tokens being worth something or not worth something isn't a big enough of incentive to vote, I just don't know what is, right? However, these people probably only have 5 or 10 EOS, so it doesn't really matter to them. I personally have a lot more invested in this thing, so I'm definitely voting to protect my investment. And anyone who gets upset about me creating a lot of EOS content, I'm just protecting my investment like any responsible investor would. And number 9, someone else said, quote, "No point in voting, too risky. There should be a reward for those brave enough to vote," close quote. Well, I actually typed this answer on YouTube. My answer was, quote, "There is a reward. If the main net doesn't activate, all our tokens are worthless," close quote. So what can I say? If you're not prepared to put the work in, but you still want the rewards, that to me, that's kind of disgusting. So no risk, no reward. That's just the way it is. Right, so that's all the main points. Having said all that, literally minutes before I pressed the record button on this video, the EOS network passed 15% of all tokens having voted. So that means the network has now officially activated. I looked at it and all of a sudden it jumped over 17% and boom, the network's activated. So in a matter of hours, transactions will be enabled on the network, and soon after that, Binance and probably other exchanges will re-enable deposits and withdrawals of EOS tokens. So the EOS tokens that you have on Binance and the other exchanges have now morphed from being Ethereum-based EOS tokens to EOS mainnet tokens. And those Ethereum-based EOS tokens, they're now worthless, right? Plus, they're permanently frozen anyway on the Ethereum network, never to be unfrozen, so it doesn't really matter. So, having looked at the price of EOS started moving up almost immediately, just as I expected. All the doubters that didn't think this thing was ever going to become real suddenly realize it is real and now are kind of FOMOing in. So that's fine by me. So that's all I've got for you today. If you'd like this episode, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you disliked it, hit the dislike button. Please leave me a comment below with some feedback and get subscribed. And if you want to take my structured online courses and become more informed so you don't make uninformed YouTube comments, check out the link in the video description. You can learn about blockchain tech, you can learn how to make and save money with Bitcoin, or you can even learn how to trade Bitcoin. All the details at the courses page in the video description. That's all I've got for you today, guys. I'll be back with the next episode of the Cryptoverse. So until then, it's me, Chris Coney, saying bye for now.